Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller, and you've turned into your Alaska weather, courtesy of the National Weather Service. And let's jump right in. It is October 19th, 2017. Happy Thursday evening. And as always, you can get a hold of us at 1-800-472-0391, and that'll get you to any of the three offices that you're looking for, Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage. And then you can also get in touch with us, weather.gov/Alaska. That'll give you the whole state, and then you can dial in from there to where you want to go. And if you need any help with the show, or if you have feedback or comments or questions, nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov, and Mr. Dave Snider will be happy to answer those emails. So let's take a look at our headlines tonight. Winter weather continues across the Bering Strait. It's diminished now over the Beaufort Sea coast, but still a little bit of blowing snow up there, but we'll primarily focus on the Bering Strait. And we have a continued warm and wet, windy conditions for southern southeast Alaska. Let me slide over here so you can see that whole line, and you can we'll see that here on our surface maps, that down towards the Dixon entrance, and that area is where the most active weather remains as areas of low pressure continue to slide through the northeastern portion of the Gulf, and plenty of cold air to work with across much of the state. Air is starting to funnel down now from the Arctic, and so thus we are seeing colder temperatures, lots of cold air showers, and some snow starting to make its way south of the Alaska Range. Storm tracking across the Bering, and that's really what's going to help to bring down some more of that cold air. Could also produce some snowfall across South Central going into the weekend. So how about our hazards? Well, these have actually all just expired as of late, so if you're just tuning in, these are no longer out. We're basically looking at the ones from Point Hope down through Savunga, and those are for a combination of winter weather advisories and high surf advisories. And so take a look at your local office to get the latest details. Most of the winter weather advisories are in effect until 4 p.m. on Friday for a combination of blowing snow and a combination of accumulating snow. So as much as 4 to 10 inches in some spots there on the Seward Peninsula, a little bit less up to the north where the flow is more offshore, and gusts as high as 45 miles an hour. But again, tune into your local forecast and check your latest on warnings and advisories if you need to listen to the NOAA Weather Radio to get the latest update for your local area. And again, those are out until about 10 p.m. On Saturday. So as far as the high surf advisories, we're looking for those for the southern areas to start up around 10 p.m. tonight, but they will be ending tomorrow morning for the northern areas. So this storm system is working its way around, and thus the different timings. So again, check your latest forecast from the Fairbanks office to get the updates on those hazards. Let's jump into our satellite now, and you can see here is our big storm system that is out over the Aleutian Islands, starting to wrap in some colder air. That's why you see kind of the freckled appearance there, and that is the colder air starting to pop up over top of the warmer waters. Here's our area of low pressure that is dropping through the Bering Straits. You might call this an Arctic low. It's definitely bringing down some colder, much colder temperatures, especially aloft. So that's why we have those advisories and whatnot up along the Arctic coastline there. Just some low clouds here holding in along the Beaufort Sea coast. And then as you work towards south central Alaska, actually a pretty nice day with continued offshore flow. We'll loop that again. You can see this area of low pressure spinning towards the eastern Gulf and bringing just dry air through here. Some light snow maybe along the Alcan border, but nothing really significant, maybe some low clouds there. How about for southeast Alaska? Well, one area of low pressure is moving onshore near Ketchikan, and another one will spin up here, will continue to spin and move off towards the east. So the northern portion of the Panhandle will be a little bit better conditions than the areas south of mainly Sitka, so Ketchikan and Wrangell. You can expect a little bit worse conditions as we move towards the weekend. So one more time there, the onshore flow through southeast, and taking a look back at our big front that's stretched out now across much of the Aleutian chain. So that front looks like an occluded front back towards the Aleutians and back towards the western Aleutians, Shimia and Attu. But towards the leading edge, it is still have a pocket of warm air that is starting to push up towards the Aleutian chain, helping to keep this all rain. But as you get a little bit further north, where the cold air is able to filter down from the Bering Strait, that's where you'll find some mix of rain and snow showers throughout the Pribilof Islands area. As you get a little bit further north, Cape Newenham and northwards, that's where we have our snow associated with this area of low pressure at 993. Not real deep in terms of low pressure, but it is got plenty of cold air. It does have plenty of cold air, so it's wrapping that down and around. That's what's really going to help to invigorate this system, give it the winds and the snow that we talked about there on the hazards map. Some light snowfall along the Alcan border, nothing really significant. And there's our blowing snow that continues with some patchy fog along the Arctic coastline, and the hazards have been dropped, but you still see some deteriorating conditions up there. Along the Gulf here, we can see plenty of showers moving out across the Gulf. Again, cold air streaming down from the mainland, streaming down from the continental air mass and moving out over this maritime air mass, which produces that, again, freckled appearance and plenty of showers, some heavier in nature. Our area of low pressure is at 981 and continues to bring showers and some higher elevation snow as you get into southeast Alaska. Let's take a look now what we expect for tonight. Well, not a lot of change, just mainly an eastward track along our jet from west to east with this low at 982, and then a southbound track for this low here along the Arctic coast. So in between there, you can expect that mixed precipitation near the Pribilof Islands and plenty of rain starting to stretch into Dutch Harbor, maybe making it into Cold Bay later this evening and eventually into Sandpoint. For the west coast, though, it'll be mostly snow, maybe a little bit of mix out over the open waters there, but for the mainland and for the Seward Peninsula, you can expect snow. Some of that will be heavy at times, and plenty of wind associated with this system as well. Again, gusts to 45 miles an hour, not out of the question. Improving conditions along the Arctic coastline, that's why those advisories have been dropped up there, but possibility offshore just for a little bit of mixed precipitation. Over towards southeast Alaska, our area of low pressure is at 987 millibars, continuing just to spin there and work some moisture into southeast Alaska. Most of this should be rain until you get up into the higher elevations near the White Pass and Chilkoot Pass area. That's where you could see some snow starting to mix in, but otherwise just showers out over the open Gulf. How about on Friday? Well, the showers are going to continue for the Bering Sea. Again, cold air just being reinforced. The cold air is kind of following these lines here from north to south. These are our lines of pressure, and air generally likes to move along those when there's not a big storm system. So the air is moving north to south, riding along those, and hence we expect north to south shower lines to form across the Bering. That's kind of why there's that unique depiction there. Eventually that'll turn to a rain-snow mix, and then all rain as you get further south towards the North Pacific. Out over the west coast there, that's our area of low pressure, again, on that southbound track at 985 millibars. And with that, more snow starting to spread down in towards the Bristol Bay area. Not quite going to be all that cold in the Bristol Bay, not going to see the precipitation make it that far, but we should still see some snow north of Cape Newenham. Patchy fog once again for the Bethel area, the YK Delta area tomorrow morning, as we saw some pretty dense fog there this morning. Not a whole lot of change for that area, so more tomorrow morning. Up towards the Arctic coast, 994 low, not going to be a big player, just some light snow for the Arctic coastline there. And then over towards southeast Alaska, that's where we have that onshore flow continuing. Again, rain along the coastlines, a little bit more towards rain snow as you get inland and higher elevations, and then especially towards the Copper River Delta and farther inland of southeast Alaska, a little bit more towards the snow. As we get into Saturday now, you can see plenty of moisture working around this area of low pressure and starting to work its way north to south. So this has a nice feed of moisture, and with that, we continue to see plenty of snow showers, some rain and snow mixing together. And then there's where those heavier showers out are over the Bering Sea, becoming heavy rain showers as you get a little bit further to the south. Our area of low pressure here in the Bristol Bay area now at 985, starting to lose some of its punch as it does get a little bit more modified by the warm air over the Bering Sea. And so with that, we do expect the showers to diminish through that area, and we should see this low continue to weaken. As we look over towards the Gulf of Alaska, that's where our next strong system will form at 972 millibars, and with that, plenty of moisture coming up with this one as well. It'll bring more light rain and eventually a rain-snow mix, becoming all snow as you get a little bit further inland. But this is the system that we'll be watching into the weekend. Could wrap some snow back into the Prince William Sound area as well, possibility of some snow for Seward. This has really been a tricky pattern for the models to lock onto. So for those hoping for snow across the Anchorage Bowl, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, stay tuned. This low is would be the one responsible for that. However, the track has been very uncertain, so uncertainty remains relatively high going into the weekend. How about those temperatures going into the weekend? Well, let's take a look at southeast Alaska, and you can see temperatures for tomorrow morning generally about the same as they were this morning. Continued a little bit warmer towards the Ketchikan, Wrangell area, a little bit cooler towards Yakutat, 35 degrees overnight. So low 40s, upper 30s. Definitely colder air trapped in the inland areas where you see teens, maybe even single digits in the Copper River Basin. And then as you get northward towards Fairbanks, 9 degrees expected tonight. And then along the Brooks Range there, almost minus 10. So definitely starting to see that colder air work in. How about right along the Seward Peninsula? That's where we have that warm air coming up and the cold air coming down, so creating that the stronger winds there. And so temperatures generally tomorrow morning in the upper teens to low 20s. For southwest Alaska, temperatures generally in the low 20s tomorrow, and then out over the Alaska Peninsula, we'll see mid to low 30s. For Friday afternoon, expect temperatures again pretty similar to today, rebounding into the mid 40s for southeast Alaska. We'll expect mid to upper 20s for south central Alaska, probably our coldest day of the week here, with plenty of cold air being reinforced all week long. And as we look up towards the interior portion of the state, mainly in the upper teens to low 20s, some single digits along the Brooks Range, upper teens along the Arctic coastline there, and then our warm spot here along southwest Alaska in the low 30s. Low 30s and low 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. For Saturday morning, you can expect generally in the mid to upper 30s across southeast Alaska, some 40s as you get further south. Single digits are going to be the name of the game along the Brooks Range, and a little bit warmer out here towards southwest Alaska and a little bit warmer out over the Akpen. And then into Saturday afternoon, rebounding pretty close to 50 for southeast Alaska, but cold temperatures start to modify ever so slightly as we start to see some warm air make its way up from the Gulf.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, let's dive into flying weather now. And as you would expect with that strong frontal system out over the Aleutians and starting to move towards the Alaska Peninsula, widespread MVFR conditions dominating there. Warm air moving over the cooler ocean waters and thus seeing plenty of low ceilings and visibilities, and a pocket of IFR also associated right along the front there. Up towards the Arctic coastline there, that's where we see another wide swath of instrument flight rules, and then a small area here associated with that low pressure that we talked about rotating around the Seward Peninsula, and otherwise MVFR conditions in pockets along the west coast. In the Gulf of Alaska, again, fairly widespread MVFR over the water, not nearly as widespread up in the portions of the land there, but starting to work moisture into the terrain, making for some lower ceilings Friday morning. Similar story for Friday afternoon, maybe a little bit more widespread as that onshore flow increases, low pressure just hanging up in that area. Towards the Bering Sea, you can start to see a few more breaks. Some dry air will work in from the north to the south, starting to create some pockets of VFR conditions, but inside the showers, MVFR, possibly even IFR. Outside the showers, potentially VFR conditions. So hit or miss through the Bering and IFR along the front. And IFR continues just north of the Arctic coastline there, starting to clip Barrow as the Friday afternoon time frame comes in, and then a few pockets of IFR along the west coast. Similar story for Saturday morning, and we start to see a little bit more VFR conditions opening up through the Bering into Bristol Bay, but we still have some IFR conditions and some MVFR, possibility of some patchy fog there near Bethel and the Kuskokwim Delta. IFR conditions starting to break up a little bit south of the Alaska Peninsula, but you can see our front pivoting into the Gulf, creating IFR conditions there, and then again MVFR conditions with continued moisture pushing into southeast. That starts to improve a little bit Saturday afternoon, but the front does spin off near to Ketchikan, so you can expect IFR conditions in a small band there. Otherwise, MVFR conditions across the northern Gulf, south central Alaska, and MVFR conditions in pockets across western Alaska, starting to open up a little bit more over the Alaska Peninsula and opening up a little bit more along the Arctic coast. So how about our passes? Well, they're looking pretty good. All passes will be visual flight rules. Adigan and Atuvik for Friday, Lake Clark and Merrill. With that dry offshore flow, rainy, windy will be visual flight rules. Isabel, visual flight rules. There is one exception, but the suspense is going to have to continue to be drawn out. Portage, visual flight rules. And it's not till you get to Chilkoot and White that we see those marginal visual flight rules with that moisture backing up in the terrain, creating some lower ceilings and lower visibilities. So how about our freezing levels? Well, for Friday morning, we do see that surface line continuing to hug right along the coastline there. That polar or that continental air mass is cold enough to drop the freezing line all the way to the surface, and that's no surprise for those that have been up here for the last few days, seeing that colder air starting to dive down. And then not until you get down to the southern Gulf of Alaska do you see the 2,000-foot line, and finally 4,000 feet. It does climb up into southeast Alaska, but that's the last vestige of it across the state. As we look into icing now, you can see fairly widespread areas of just isolated moderate, mainly working around this area of low pressure above 3,000 and a little bit farther north above 2,000 feet for the west coast. A fairly wide swath, a little bit more patchy probably than we have depicted here, but above 3,000 feet and stretching up over Dead Horse and Barrow. And then again along our front above 6,000 feet, just some isolated moderate conditions. Not until you get a little bit further inland into the terrain above 6,000 feet could you expect some isolated moderate icing across southeast Alaska on Friday. How's our jet stream looking? Well, pretty similar to yesterday. See two components of it working together to make it all the way up to 165 knots, basically due west to east, and just a small undulation here over the North Pacific at about 135 knots, and then off into the lower 48 at 100 knots. Around this area of low pressure, we do have about 60 or 70 knots helping to support that system up there. And this can be seen at 9,000 feet as a northerly flow coming down into that jet, and then it turns quickly from west to east. So you got about 60 knots here on the north-south, turning sharply west to east, and then southeast back to northwest, 40 knots around that area of low pressure. Over the mainland, offshore flow will continue for southern Alaska, but we still have that counterclockwise flow near the Seward Peninsula at about 20 knots, and then generally southeast 15 knots for southeast Alaska. Similar story there at 3,000 feet for southeast Alaska, and a similar story, 10 knots of offshore flow. Could be a little gusty through bays and passes here near Kodiak Island, especially near the Barren Islands. And then again, that strong turning around this area of low pressure is really where we'd be watching out for some turbulence. Northerly flow dominating the Bering, and a quick switch in directions up here along the Arctic coastline. So what does that mean for turbulence? Well, there's those pockets below 5,000 feet. This will primarily be in the morning, diminishing through the day, isolated moderate. Our biggest area of considerable moderate will be below 4,000 feet near the Aleutians, and then just a small pocket here along the northwest coast.
Sayonara to Saturn. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. Dean, I have some sad news to report. Cue the sad music.
What is it? Oh my gosh. Is it an asteroid coming to destroy the Earth?
No, but I hate to have to tell you, we only have a few more weeks to see Saturn in the evening sky.
No!
I'm afraid so.
Yeah, I know. But it's not the end of the world. I'm just always a little sad when my favorite planet disappears behind the sun. Saturn is just such a cool thing to see in a telescope.
I know. It looks so unreal with the rings and the moons. It looks like someone put a sticker on the end of the telescope.
But it is the real thing. So let's head outside and find Saturn. Okay, we have our skies set for October 21st at 8 p.m. facing southwest. The most noticeable star in this part of the sky is no star at all. It's my favorite planet, the amazing ringed world, Saturn.
Now, Saturn doesn't stand out as much as Venus or Jupiter in the night sky. Saturn is only about as bright as the brightest stars of summer. And you definitely can't see the rings without a telescope, although Dean still tries.
Nope, can't see them, can't see them.
Just look for a pretty, bright, yellow-tinted star that doesn't twinkle very much. Nearby stars like Antares just above the horizon and Nunki over there will twinkle a lot. Planets don't twinkle as much as stars.
And you can also look for the constellations around Saturn. To the left of Saturn is a group of stars that look like a teapot. That's actually the Centaur, who's named Sagittarius, who is half man, half horse.
Up and to the right of Saturn, you'll find a group of stars in a stretched pentagon shape. That is Ophiuchus, the great mythological doctor who could raise the dead and just happens to be holding a snake.
And just below Saturn, you may find the remnants of Scorpius the Scorpion, who is setting fast. The bright star Antares is the Scorpion's heart, and it'll be gone soon.
Well, let's fly up to Saturn really quick and let's take a closer look. Through a telescope, you might get a view of Saturn like this. You can see the rings and its brightest moon named Titan.
Through a better telescope, you can see more details in the rings, including a gap, that black ring in there. That's called Cassini's division. Plus, you may see a few more moons like Rhea, Tethys, and Dione.
And then if you could have hitched a ride with the Cassini spacecraft before it crashed into the planet, you'd get views of Saturn like these.
There are so many rings you can't count them all. And we now know of at least 62 moons that circle Saturn. The play of light and shadow on the planet, rings, and moons is just spectacular. This is why Saturn is my favorite planet. So now we get to the sad part. Saturn is quickly heading around the sun and soon will not be visible in the evening sky. Yes, that is tragic.
But you have a few more weeks to look for it. And if we advance time to October 22nd, check out what's coming into view.
Ah, the moon!
Exactly. And if we move to October 23rd, the waxing crescent moon will slide even closer to Saturn. And that means...
Cue the conjunction music!
We'll have a Moon-Saturn conjunction.
And the party won't stop the next night because on October 24th, the moon will still be near Saturn.
So that's still a conjunction?
Close enough for you. So don't waste another night this month without looking for Saturn in the sky.
It'll be the bright, yellow, non-twinkling light low in the southwest after dark.
And if you can, get a view of it through a telescope to see the beautiful rings. You might discover that it's your favorite planet too. Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Now time for your marine forecast. And let me slide over so you can all see that the sea ice is growing from northwest to southeast, starting to get ready to make a connection there between the pack ice just offshore, maybe about 45 miles between the two there. And otherwise, we're seeing a little bit of growth here along the Arctic coastline. As winds start to diminish, we expect that growth to continue. And then it also is starting to build in here down by Point Lay, stretching down towards Point Hope. Not much in the Norton Sound yet, but with colder temperatures, expect continued growth as soon as those winds die down with our system that is off the Seward Peninsula. How about for southeast Alaska on Friday? Well, you can expect southerly flow for the inner passageways at about 15 to 20 knots and seas on the order of 3 to 4 feet. Out over the open waters, south and southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, seas between 7 and 13 feet, a little bit higher down here where our more active pattern is down by by Craig. As we look into Saturday now, that's where our stronger system is starting to really ramp up. We have southeast becoming easterly winds out over the open waters, 45 knots with gusts to 60. So be advised if you're a mariner trying to travel out over the Gulf into Saturday for the weekend, there is going to be some heavy winds and heavy seas up to 14 to 15 feet. For the inner passageways, north winds for the northern sections, 20 to 30 knots, 4 to 6 feet, and then becoming southeast near Dixon Entrance, 30 knots and seas 7 feet. For the south central areas on Friday, you can expect a generally offshore flow, north to northwest. Winds generally between 10 and 25 knots and seas on the order of about 3 to 6 feet. And for Saturday, slide over here, you can see our more hazardous conditions are off into Juneau's southeastern area with gusts to 60 out of the east, 45 knots and 14-foot seas. But for the most part, across much of the Gulf, we'll see an east to northeast wind, and that'll be between 20 and 30 knots. Once you're in the protected areas, 15 to 25 knots, seas on the order of 4 to 5 feet. For Friday, out over the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit more of a confused flow. Westerly winds here south of Kodiak, 15 knots, seas 5 feet, but then becoming east in support of that front that is approaching, 15 to 25 knots and seas between 3 and 8 feet. And then on into Saturday, generally a west wind north of the chain, but south of the chain a north and northwest wind, anywhere between 15 and 25 knots, seas 4 to 10 feet north of the peninsula and 5 to 13 feet south of it. For the Aleutians on Friday, you can expect the strongest conditions near that front, so north and northeast winds 35 to 40 knots, seas between 11 and 22 feet, and then a little bit quieter off towards the west, north to northwest winds 30 to 40, and seas between 16 and 20 feet. How about on Saturday? Well, everything is going to switch behind that front and become northwesterly, 20 to 25 knots, and seas between 9 and 13 feet. For the west coast there on Friday, you can see northwest winds down along the entire coastlines, becoming northeast there near the Cape Newenham area and Kuskokwim Bay, generally between 20 and 35 knots with seas on the order of 4 to 11 feet. And a little bit stronger as that low drops south, expect 25 to 35 knots out of the east for areas north of the Seward Peninsula, but then becoming north and northwest 25 to 35 knots as you get down further on the west coast, seas between 7 and 13 feet. And then up towards the Arctic coastline, westerly and southwesterly winds near Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik, 15 to 20 knots, seas 5 to 7 feet, but becoming northeast throughout the rest of the northwest corridor, 30 to 35 knots, and seas between 10 and 12 feet. And then finally on into Saturday, south and southwest winds, 15 knots on an order of 4 to 5 foot seas, looking for more east, northeast, and north flow along the northwest coast, and seas generally between 7 and 13 feet with winds 25 to 30 knots. So let's recap the weather. Again, most of our advisories and hazards are associated with this area of low pressure dropping down the northwest coast here. We do have a host of winter weather advisories and a couple coastal high surf advisories, so tune into your Fairbanks area or your NOAA weather radio for more information on the specifics with those. Otherwise, our area of low pressure continues to track along the Aleutian chain, bringing plenty of wet weather and some winds, and then warm and wet weather continues. Don't try to say that 3 times fast. Warm, wet weather continues for southeast Alaska with onshore flow. On into Friday, the same story will be there, except it'll improve a little bit with just more showery conditions. Our front across the Aleutians is sliding towards the Gulf, and our area of low pressure is dropping southward with cold air being reinforced behind it along the west coast. And on into Saturday now, that area of low pressure is almost to Bristol Bay. Plenty of shower activity across the Bering Sea, and this area of low pressure tries to work into south central Alaska, but brings more wet weather into southeast Alaska. Well, thanks for joining us this evening. Hope you have a great night.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.